them later. Okay, form and function in cnidarians. Okay, form and function in jellies. Their gastrovascular cavity is where they are going to be doing all of their digestion, okay, and where their food is broken down. So jellyfish are in, and sea anemones and hydroids are all in this phylum we call cnidaria, and they get that name because of their cnidoblasts, or cnidocytes, or nematocysts. Those are all different terms for the same thing. They're stinging cells, okay? So they have stinging cells on their tentacles, okay? And their tentacles, they put into the water, and then things will swim by, and as soon as they touch those tentacles, those stinging cells fire, okay? And when they fire, they shoot into the animal, and they inject toxins into the animal. So they're basically like hypodermic needles that are inverted, okay? So on the tentacles, you've got these little cells called cnidoblasts or nematocysts, and you've got these needles inside that are like tucked up inside there, okay? When you touch that tentacle, it triggers that nematocyst to fire, and it shoots out this needle, everts the needle, and that needle goes into your skin and injects the toxins into your body, okay? And that's what you're feeling, that pain, that burning, all of that stuff that comes from like a jellyfish sting is the toxins that have been injected into your body, okay? So here's like what it looks like. Here's your little unfired nematocyst, okay? You touch this, triggers it, and it ejects this needle into your skin, okay? And it is kind of like a mini cellular taser, yes. And notice how these have like backwards facing barbs, okay? So you can't pull it out. So once it like goes in, it's like hard to actually pull out. So the toxins tend to paralyze the prey, okay, so that the prey can then be pulled into their mouth and then into their gastrovascular cavity and digested. Here, today's the day of video clips for you, because here's a... Yeah, but watch what happens. So this is like a jellyfish tentacle. Those are the nematocysts firing, okay? So these are the nematocysts firing, okay? That's just in one tentacle, yes. That's in just one part of one tentacle. So watch, this one's crazy, okay? So that's, when you touch, that's what's going into your skin and injecting that toxin.
Is there like immediate,
Yes. So that's, yeah. So the toxins go in and they start to take effect and it burns and it hurts and yeah. But that's what's going on. So notice, okay, that, so the tentacles have all of those nematocysts on them. But like the other parts of the jelly's body does not. So you can touch like the bell of the jelly and it won't sting you. The nematocysts are only located on the tentacles, okay? And then they are pulled into the gastrovascular cavity. Okay. Okay, so we talked about the stinging cells last time. Here's a little bit more information about them. So the stinging cells are only located on the tentacles of the cnidarian. There are very few types of cnidarians where the stinging cells will actually be like on the bell of the jellyfish, but that's very few and far between. They're typically only found on the tentacles, and they are triggered by touch. So when you touch that tentacle, that is when you get stung. There's like a little trigger on there, and when you touch that trigger, it shoots out that cnidocyte and it gets injected into your finger, and poison is in your finger. Okay, they produce neurotoxins, so that affect the nervous system. And the reason why jellyfish's stings hurt so much more is because they have a stronger neurotoxin. And the reason for that is jellyfish have much more delicate tentacles, and so they need to kill their prey much faster so that it's not like thrashing around pulling their tentacles off. So they have much stronger neurotoxins, whereas anemones, their tentacles are much thicker. They don't have to worry about the thrashing around of the animals so much, and so they don't have as strong of a neurotoxin. You also have certain kinds of animals that can eat cnidarians. Okay, so sea turtles are awesome. They can eat cnidarians. They'll eat jellyfish. They have specialized mouths so that the stinging cells can't sting them, and their skin, they have scales all over their skin because they're reptiles, right? And so they don't get stung by the nematocysts. And then they've got a specialized digestive system that is able to digest the stinging cells. Okay, so they're able to eat jellyfish. The mola mola will also eat jellyfish. So the mola mola, the sunfish, eats jellies. Those tend to eat deep sea jellies, so they spend time down in the deep eating jellyfish, and then they come up to the surface to get their parasites removed and lay in the sun. And then sea slugs will eat things like anemones and hydroids. Here's what's cool about sea slugs. Sea slugs will actually eat these things, okay? And they have a way, we don't really know how they do it, where they prevent the nematocysts from firing. Okay, so when they eat them, the nematocysts do not fire. And so they take them, eat them, ingest them, and then they take those nematocysts that they have ingested and they actually stick them into their body wall. So when you touch a sea slug, you actually have the potential of getting stung by a hydroid, okay, or a sea anemone. Yeah, it's crazy. Not a sea slug, but you'll get to touch a sea anemone on Thursday. I don't think they have any sea cucumbers, because they might, but I don't think they do. Yes?
What's the one near the beach and stick your little finger in it?
Right. Okay, so cnidarians have radial symmetry. We already talked about that, but they have radial symmetry. And then when we look at a cnidarian, they've got two sides to them. Okay, so they have the oral and the aboral side. The oral side is going to be the side that has the mouth and the tentacles on it. And then the aboral side will be the side that does not have the mouth or tentacles. For a sea anemone, that's the side that's attached to a surface. And for the jellyfish, that aboral side is the side that you see, the top of the bell. Okay, would be the aboral side. Cnidarians are what we call suspension feeders. So they actually stick part of their body into the water column in order to capture food. It's called suspension feeding. Sponges were what kind of feeders? Filter feeders, okay? So filter feeding is different from suspension feeding. Filter feeding, you're actually pulling the water into your body if you're a sponge, and you're filtering out the food. In suspension feeding, you're sticking part of your body into the water to capture food. And so the part of their body that they stick into the water is their tentacles, okay, to capture their food. And then they capture that food and bring it in to their mouth, into their gastrovascular cavity, where it's digested. Okay? So, suspension feeders. I would definitely know the difference between filter feeding and suspension feeding. Good, start. All right, so let's look at how cnidarians carry out all of the essential life functions that we've been talking about. So movement, respiration, feeding, reproduction, all of that stuff. So respiration, respiratory, circulatory, and excretory systems. Cnidarians don't have them. So they have no organized systems for any of their circulatory, excretory, or respiratory systems. They don't need them. Okay? So remember, cnidarians have a tissue level of organization, right? And cnidarians are actually only a few cells thick. So if you look at this picture, right, on the very, very outside of the sea anemone or the jellyfish, you have the ectoderm. Okay, that's where you'll find like a lot of the cells of the jellyfish. And then on the inside, okay, lining the inside, you have the endoderm, okay, or the gastrodermis. And so that's only a few cells thick. In between there, you have what's called the mesoglia. That's the jelly stuff, right? Typically, those don't have cells in them. Okay, some kinds will, but they're special kinds of cells that can actually move. So you have the endoderm and the ectoderm, and those are only a few cells thick. So these cnidarians actually don't need full-on systems to get all of your oxygen from the water into the cells and carry it around the body, because it's only a few cells thick, so they can just rely on diffusion, and they don't need a big system to carry that out. Also for excretion, excretory system, right, waste products can diffuse out. because they're only a few cells thick. And also circulatory system. They don't need a circulatory system because look, where is that gastrovascular cavity located? Yeah, in the bottom, but it's like located throughout the entire animal, right? So it even extends into the tentacles. So when that food gets digested, all of those nutrients are throughout the entire animal already, and so they don't need a circulatory system to take those nutrients to all of the cells. Does that make sense? Yeah? So they don't need an excretory, circulatory, or respiratory system. And the same thing goes for the medusa form as well. Okay? So they don't need those systems. They just diffuse. Okay, nervous system. So cnidarians do not have a nervous system. Okay? They just simply have what we call a nerve net. So they have like nerve cells that will kind of form this net-like structure throughout the body of the cnidarian. And they may have a few kinds of cells that can detect light and dark, so kind of like their eyes, or they'll have some cells that can detect like touch. So that's why like when you touch them, they contract in on your finger. But that's it. They have no brain. They don't really have any ganglia or anything like that. It's just simply a nerve net. Okay, and that nerve net is mostly for detecting prey, and then also to coordinate the contraction of the epidermal cells in order to allow for that animal to move. Okay, so they react to their environment through these light detecting cells and their nerve nets. The musculoskeletal system, so how they move. They have no muscles. Whoops. They have no muscles, but they do have their epidermal cells on the ectoderm on the outside of their body can contract. Certain kinds of them can contract. And so they will be signaled to contract by that nerve net, and they will swim. The medusa form will swim with jet propulsion. Okay? So what they do, it's like a bell shape, right? When that medusa is relaxed, okay, it's got water underneath the edges of the bell. Okay, when those epidermal cells contract, they squirt that water out from underneath the edge of the bell, and it pushes that medusa forward. So it's like jet propulsion. Okay, it squeezes it out and pushes it forward. Then it relaxes, lets the water come back in, squeezes it out, moves it forward. Relaxes. So that's how you get that like jellyfish movement. Like that's why they're doing that. Okay, in order to move around. Reproductive systems. So they can do both asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction, the polyps can do budding, so they'll form like a little mini me off the side and drop off and become a new one. Okay, or sexual reproduction, the medusa will either be male or female. Okay, and they'll produce either eggs or sperm, and those will be released into the water column, and where the egg and sperm will come together, form a little larva. That larva will settle down on the sea floor and become a little polyp. Okay, that polyp will divide asexually and then create new medusa, which are the sexually mature form of the jellyfish and the form that you see most often. Okay, so that's how like most will reproduce. For like anthozoan sea anemones, they have no medusa form. So you've got like your little sea anemone, they release eggs and sperm, form a little larva, settle down, become a new polyp. Okay, so no medusa form. Okay, so here's an example of a life cycle of a jellyfish. So larva settles down, becomes polyp, produces medusa, releases gametes, so on and so forth. And then a simplified version of it for you. All right? Okay, ecology of cnidarians. So that's how they carry out all of their essential life functions. And there's actually, you'll be doing a little bit more reading on that as well, this cycle. But ecology